Republic of Strashnakovia, ROS for short, is our vision for an advanced adversary. This group is focused on stealing sensitive information such as trade secrets and intellectual property. They leverage a more advanced set of tools and techniques, such as covert mode of operation to avoid detection, and legitimate tools to carry out their malicious intent. To make this exercise easier to understand and to focus on the important parts, we'll focus only on a couple of hosts, the Execo1 and the Engineering04 machines, with IP addresses 10.102.4.23 and 10.102.6.5 respectively. In terms of the event log data that is collected from these machines, we have metric bit and packet bit for both machines. For Execo1, we also capture Windows event logs, and for Engineering04, audit bit is deployed. Some other key information that we need to be aware of is that Execo1 is already compromised, and there is also a compromised user account created named Ultron. On Engineering04, this might seem unrelated, but we have detections in place for a sensitive file in the research folder. The file is called ultroncad_research.cad.iso. Now that we all have the details, it's time to deep dive into the investigation. First, we'll check the users who have logged into the Execo1 machine. Second, we'll try to identify if there are any indicators of lateral movement. And finally, we'll see if we can identify if the sensitive files have been tampered with. We'll start off this demo by going over some of the events on the known to be compromised Execo1 host. Focusing on the users that have logged into this host, we can see that there are a few events for Ultron, which is known to be a compromised account. Next, we want to see if there are other hosts on the networks which might have been targeted for lateral movement. And for this, we'll switch to the packet bit to the flow dashboard. In the network traffic between hosts category, we can see there is an increased amount of traffic between 10.102.4.23, which is Execo1, and 10.102.6.5, which is Engineering04. So let's investigate Engineering04 next. We'll go back to the Discover tab and we'll modify the filter to include Engineering04 and also Ultron to see if this compromised user account appears in any of the logs. And we can see there is a recorded event and also WSM PROV host, which we mentioned in the previous module, as this process can be correlated with a remote PowerShell connection, and it's most likely due to a lateral movement attempt. With audit bit, we can monitor a couple of sensitive files on the Engineering04 host, so we'll investigate if there are any actively recorded for these files. And we can see there are a couple of events for the research folder. To get a better view, we'll add in a few columns for event action, file owner, and file size. And based on this information, we can see that the file has been tampered with by changing the owner as well as replaced with another file of a smaller size. At the beginning of this course, the timeline feature was introduced. Well, I have already created a timeline for these events. Now this can be used by other security analysts to share notes, hand over, or escalate this incident. To go over some of the key points in this investigation, we have identified malicious activity based on the login from the compromised user account on the Execo1 host. Even more interesting, we have identified artifacts of lateral movement in the form of a PS session. We can also establish that in terms of actions on objectives, the goal was to steal the file and replace it with a copy. And we have learned this based on the modified file size. What's also important to note is that not always you'll get 100% of the picture, and sometimes it's important to correlate as much as possible until the scenario is more clear.